Thank you for coming. So my talk is about deploying SerialDB to Kubernetes with GitOps. My name is Ryota Sawada, and I'm from Appsider Inc. And quick agenda. So I'm going to start with who I am. I'm going to talk about myself, about Appsider, and what this talk is about, and what this talk is not about. And we'll go into horizontal scalability aspect of things, especially when it comes to deploying SerialDB. And SerialDB's design is something that I would touch quickly. Kubernetes and TiKV, kind of a very quick overview of it. And we'll go into GitOps and just quickly touch on what GitOps is and why GitOps, and would then go into a bit of projects to have a look. And then we'll go into demo and have a quick summary at the end. The slide is available with this QR code or w.sh, SerialDB Social, November 2023, GitOps. So quick intro. So I'm Ryota Sawada. I'm a principal engineer at Appsider. I'm passionate about learning, building, and sharing things or technology, and that's why I'm here. And I have a son and 2 cats, and the profile picture bottom right is what I use all the time. Those are my 2 cats. And you can find me at RYTSWD, which is my full name without vowels, and you can find it in usual places. And about Appsider, and I'm pretty sure that no one has heard about it, but it's a fintech startup providing B2B payment. And it's based in Tokyo, Japan, and headquartered based in Tokyo, Japan. And for that reason, it's adopted by 25,000 plus companies, but mostly in Japan. But the remote team is all around. I'm based here, and there are a few folks here in London, and there are a few more in Europe, so, and also one in New York. So the team is all around the world, and we do multi-cloud and multi-cluster system. That's kind of the part of the talk about how do we want to make sure that everything is horizontally scalable and can be managed in Kubernetes. And we are hiring, so if you're curious about what we do, please come to me after the talk. So about this talk, so a bit of disclaimer first. So this is based on my personal experience and opinions, so hopefully I'm not going to offend anyone from SerialDB at this talk, but I'll give my honest opinion and yeah, what I have come across. And this covers how we actually deploy at Appsider. So hopefully this is something that you can take away for productionizing SerialDB and what it means actually to productionize. And this talk focuses on architecture and demos, so probably not deep dive, probably not enough to actually productionize, but hopefully it's a stepping stone for that. So horizontal scalability. So SerialDB's design. So SerialDB is so easy to start up. You just do serial start, and it's really easy to get started. But if you think about SerialDB as a production system, you want to make sure that it can be deployed in a horizontal scalable system or setup. And SerialDB is designed for that. So SerialDB, if you're not familiar with it, just a quick overview of SerialDB, how it works. It has the storage layer and compute layer separated. It's a bit different from the traditional databases, and that's what makes it really horizontally scalable and easy to manage. And when it comes to storage layer, if you want to have the storage with the horizontal scalability, it says that in the documentation you have to use TiKV. That's something I'm going to talk about in a bit. And also for the compute, you don't have to use Kubernetes, but that's one of the things that you can use for horizontally scaling all the processes that you need for SerialDB. So from that sense, when you separate the storage and compute, the problem becomes much easier to solve. And I need to mention about SerialKV, which is a project that's being worked on. I think I don't know anything about it because I don't work for SerialDB, but it's probably one of the solutions that we would look at when it comes to productionizing it or horizontal scalability, because TiKV is definitely one of the solutions, but as I talk about it in the bit, SerialKV is definitely, could be that the TiKV may not be needed. So in, I don't know how many months or year, it might be that this talk is completely going to be stale, but hopefully it can serve some use cases. So about Kubernetes quickly, I'm pretty sure that you have heard about Kubernetes or you have used it. So it's a graduated project from CNCF ecosystem, and it's basically de facto standard for container orchestration. And it comes with deployment state and daemon set. So these are the how you use Kubernetes, and there are 3 different types. What we're going to look at is deployment and stateful set, and especially deployment and stateful set are very different in a way that deployment is used for stateless workloads, so where you don't have to save any data. Stateful set, on the other hand, as the name suggests, you can save the state and you can save the data with it. So from the stateful set and deployment combined together, we can have the horizontal scalability. Daemon set is a little bit outside the scope. We don't really use it today, but definitely Kubernetes is designed for scalability to begin with. And TiKV. TiKV is a project also under CNCF. So it's a graduated project, and they claim it's a distributed transactional key-value database based on the design of Google Spanner and HBase, but simpler in language and blah, blah, blah. And there is a TiDB and also TiKV. It's a bit confusing, and I get a lot of questions with that. TiDB is a database based on TiKV. So TiKV is running behind the scenes for TiDB, but you can use just TiKV only, and that's what SerialDB does for or uses for the horizontal scalable deployment. And TiDB has an operator for deploying to Kubernetes. So if you want to deploy TiKV or TiDB to Kubernetes, you can use this. You can use this thing called TiDB operator, and you don't have to use TiDB just because you're using TiDB operator. There is no such thing as TiKV operator. So it's a bit confusing when it comes to the naming and when it comes to the project, but we'll be looking at TiDB operator a little bit. And TiKV is a KV store, key value store, and key value store is not new. There are a few different projects with key value store solutions like etcd, Redis, whatever. But there is specific requirements that SerialDB needed for TiKV or key value store to work, and TiKV just fits that. So if you're thinking about using some other KV store for SerialDB backend, storage backend, it may not work, and TiKV is the solution for now, unless SerialKV comes out. So quick look at GitOps. So GitOps is, what is it, first of all? So it's about declaring everything in Git. So you have a Git repository, you have files in there, you declare everything in there, and nothing else should be, anything that's not outside, that's not inside of the Git repository should not change anything to do with the cluster, Kubernetes cluster. So Git repository is to maintain the entire environment. So GitOps, if you have a GitOps in place, you try to make any changes that's against the GitOps declaration, GitOps engine, GitOps deployment, whatever the solution that you're using, will revert the changes that you made. So GitOps, with the GitOps in place in Kubernetes, you can make sure that everything you see in Git repository is actually what is in the Kubernetes cluster. So you can find some references. I've got some more references at the end of the slide, but there are quite a few documents about what GitOps is. It's not just about using Git. It's about using Git as environment control, and you just use it as a single source of truth. And projects related to GitOps are Flux and Argo CD, or Argo. So Flux was the first one that coined the term GitOps, and that's created by Weaveworks. And it's very powerful, and it's got custom resources that, like all the resources that you would need. And it's focused on the platform management. It's very easy to use from the platform management perspective, from Kubernetes management perspective. But when it comes to actually using GitOps for day-to-day stuff, not just as platform stuff, but deploying everything, there is another project called Argo CD, or Argo. Argo is a project, a bigger project, and a part of it there is the Argo CD. And it handles all the complex scenarios, more so than Flux. It comes with more, I guess, tools to control the deployments, and has a friendly UI. So because of that, I'm going to stick to that Argo CD project for the demo, and we'll walk through what it really feels like to use at GitOps. So with that quick overview, I'm going to go into demo. With the demo, so I'm going to create a Kubernetes cluster. Hopefully, everything starts up timely. But we'll use Civils cluster. It just happens to be some cluster that I can just get it up and running really quickly. So I'm going to try to use a cluster that's in the cloud and try to wire up everything with SerialDB and TinyKV with GitOps. And there are a few tools used with Alacrity, Arc Browser, and Emacs, but we can see all of that in action in a bit. The demo steps are in this repository. You can find that. With that, okay, thank you. Let's see if I can make it work. All right, not this way. First of all, I should have shown you the. So this is the repository, Ryota Sawada and SerialDB Social 2023. It's got a few files and it's got some details. So if you got this link, the GitHub repository, or the link to the slide, you should be able to find all the references. But before going to the files, I need to start something. So I need to, first of all, start the cluster. So let me start the cluster first. And what I'm going to do is to create a cluster. Civil cluster provides this command. I hope you can see this. Yeah, it's big enough? OK. So it's starting the cluster, so I'm going to just wait for that. And while that's happening, let me just make it smaller. And the steps here to create all the cluster setup, including SerialDB, TinyKV, Kubernetes as a full-fledged Kubernetes, is to essentially only a few steps. Create cluster, which is actually what's happening right now. Create a temporary directory just to store some data that we will be using, and pull the repository, because it's going to be based on Git repository. The repository that you saw just earlier with GitHub is something that you need to just pull down. And after that, you just run one command, and not exactly one, but essentially one bunch to set up everything. And once that's done, everything should be up and running, and everything is done. So we just have to give a few more moments for the cluster to be ready. And let me just have a look at the cluster state. So this is the Civil dashboard. And you can see that SerialDB Social demo is starting up. There is a backup, so if anything goes wrong, I can go back to the backup. But hopefully, I don't have to do it. So OK, so SerialDB Social demo is up now. And yeah, I think I'm ready for that. So what I'm going to do first is to create the temporary directory, cd into it, nothing too difficult. So what I'm going to do is just to execute it behind the scenes. You don't have to see that. And pull, oh, that's not what I meant. Come on. There you go. And sorry. What I would do next is to clone the repository. So another SerialDB Social 2023. And if I just execute this, let's execute this in shell. So I got that. The screen is a little bit messed up, but so I got. Let me try to do. Great. Why does it not work for me? OK. So I got the repository copied. And when that's in place, what I can do is to apply all the manifests that I pulled in from the repository. So installing the GitOps and Argo CD, which I'm going to be using today, essentially is about getting Argo CD in place and then getting some definitions for Argo CD to know that, OK, what are the files, what are the things that we need to know to get to the repository, Git repository. So if I just run this command, this is a simple one. And it's creating some namespaces for Kubernetes setup. If you're not too familiar with Kubernetes, we'll see all of that in action in UI in a little bit. But if you are familiar with it, it should be pretty simple. just getting some manifests, very simple namespaces, and then applying some of the files, Argo CD installation and Argo CD orchestration and some Argo CD setup as well. So if I do that, and it just takes a little bit of time. And while that's taking place, let's have a look at the cluster with another tool called K9S. So you can see that things are kind of not in ready. Blue things are not in ready. It's kind of starting up. Orange is just about to start, and you can see quite a few changes happening right now. So Argo CD process is starting up, and we are getting the Kubernetes cluster set up with Argo CD, but Argo CD doesn't really know yet where to connect to. And if I were to just quickly get the UI, in order to do that, I need to update the login password. This is just for demo. You shouldn't do this for production ever, but for demo, I can. So I got that. So the next bit is to go open up Argo CD UI. So what I'm going to do is to start a port forward so that I can connect to Kubernetes processes that are running inside of Kubernetes from my local machine. So I'm going to start that. It's running in the background. And if I were to go to localhost 8080, you will get this, your connection is not private, but because you're connecting to localhost, you don't really care. So you just click on that, you don't care, I just go ahead. And then you will be navigated to this Argo CD login page. And this particular one is set to username of admin and password of admin if you followed along the same pattern. And then you just sign in. So now you can see that Argo CD is trying to figure out where to connect to, and it doesn't know where to. And this just happens to be that Argo CD installation, at the installation time, it just didn't have all the credentials and everything set up. So when I just click on refresh, everything should start to flow in. So let's just see how it works. So you start to see not just 2 boxes, there are 8 boxes, I think, or 7. And you can see that there are Argo CD stuff at the top, and there's this other namespaces. And in the middle, there is a SerioDB. For the SerioDB to be fully ready, it has to have all the other resources to be available. So at this moment, you can see that there are 3 green boxes, Argo CD orchestration, other namespaces, and other storage class. These are the things that are already up and running, ready, fully ready. But the ones that are in blue are still kind of coming up. And other stuff, essentially, SerioDB is the one of the only ones. So Argo CD installation, which is taking a little bit of time to turn green. SerioDB is another one that's essentially waiting for TiKV and other stuff to be fully up so that SerioDB can be fully up as well. So if you look at SerioDB right now, you can see that SerioDB is in this broken hurt crash loop back office saying it's an error. It just hasn't really properly figured out everything is running. So in a few moments, I think it takes about a minute or 2 to get everything up and running. So while that's taking place, let's just quickly go back to the, not this repository. So what's happening with the GitOps is that now Argo CD is looking at all the files in this repository, SerioDB Social 2023. So if you go into manifests, there are Argo CD directory, SerioDB directory, and TiKV, TiDB directory. And if you look at it further, you can see that Argo CD has installation, orchestration. TiKV has a few folders. So everything that Argo CD is doing is to look at the files or the directories or folders here and figure out which one to install. And that's what's happening behind the scenes. And it's just trying to make sure that the Kubernetes knows about all the files that are in this repository. So you don't have to actually interact with Kubernetes anymore. I did with the kubectl and K9S, but I don't have to anymore. I just have to put all the files in the repository, and that's it. I don't have to think about, okay, how Kubernetes is deployed, how Kubernetes is managed. I can, unless someone really messes up manually, I can be sure that the Git repository is the source of the truth. So with that, let's see if everything is up and running. And it is not. Let's give it another. Oh, it's starting. Is it starting? It is not starting, but let me try to restart it by deleting this. And it doesn't come up. It's taking some time, so if I were to really look at it, SurrealDB. Oh, this is not helpful. TiKV. TiKV is just starting up, and that's probably the reason why it's taking a while. And with, oh, SurrealDB is finally up. So now I should be able to interact with SurrealDB. Let's do HeroD. So what I'm going to do is to connect to the database, to the Kubernetes cluster, and interact with it with SurrealQL, SQL command. I could use SurrealList or some other methods. I think this is the easiest. SurrealSQL. And at this point, I'm trying to connect to SurrealDB TiKV, which is what you see here, somewhere here. And I try to connect to it using very secure password. And okay, this is, I guess, create user Ryota, or my usual username, and set name equals to Ryota. And now I should be able to select star from user. So with this, all the SurrealDB setup is done. What I did was just to connect to it and then query or get data. So with this in setup, Kubernetes is fully up and running with the GitOps. So, all right, so at least the demo worked in a way. OK, so let me get back to the slide. OK, so a quick summary of what happened. So we just saw a declarative deployment with the GitOps. So what happened with SurrealDB deployment was just install Argo CD and nothing else. So you didn't really have to think about, OK, how do you actually install SurrealDB? How do you actually install TiKV? Everything is declared, and everything is in the file. So if you want to know how it is actually installed, you can just check out the repository. And if you want to change anything, if you want to change the version or degrade or upgrade, you can just do that from Git repository. You just need to create a pull request, perhaps, and then update the file. And that is the power of the GitOps. TiKV was something that I basically hid under the hood of GitOps. So it is actually very complicated to get TiKV up and running in a meaningful way and also in a stable way to really get the production ready setup. So from that sense, SurrealKV may be definitely an interesting solution, but TiKV is definitely production ready, but you have to be careful how to manage it. And because it is difficult to manage it, it would really make sense to have it under the GitOps kind of control, so that any change to TiKV would only go through after pull request review or approvals. And SurrealDB deployment is something that can be involved. So it looked as if it was really magical and it was easy. Just do Argo CD, install Argo CD, and just that's it. It is true, but the files that are inside the repository has a little bit more complicated, not complicated, but a bit more involved logic to it. So if you want to know how SurrealDB can be a bit of difficulty at times, you might want to check out the repository to get more manifest details. With that, just a quick few references. Excuse me. So my repository, my slide deck, which I showed you earlier, and some tools I use, Midjourney and Spline, and some projects that I use, Kubernetes, Argo CD, Flux I didn't use, but definitely something that you can use. Siebel was the cluster that I used, and Kind if you want to use not Siebel, but something local, and some GitOps references again. And with that, thank you very much.
So, well, I understand that. I want to know, what is the use of doing all of this?
What is
the use of like running a database using GitOps? Like, can you tell me?
One big reason why we have to use GitOps, or from our side, from Upsider's sense, is that regulations. So we have to make sure that any changes that happen to anything, it can be code, it can be infrastructure, it can be someone getting extra access, someone getting extra data, anything has to be auditable, something that can be regulated. And from that sense, GitOps is amazing because if anything that doesn't comply or doesn't match with what the Git repository is saying, it will be reverted. We don't have to think about, okay, someone went into the Kubernetes cluster and then changed something. We don't really care because everything will be reverted real time right away. So nothing you can really go wrong if you really tried. But in most cases, with limited access control, you should be able to really rely on Git being the single source of truth. So from the regulation perspective, we have to comply with the PCI DSS and some other regulations. Regulators would come into us and we look at our pull requests and then would be, okay, what kind of databases do we use? What kind of upgrades have we done? Have we patched all the vulnerability problems? And all of that can be really just seen by Git repository. So from that sense, GitOps is a must. And in that sense, SerialDB being deployable with Kubernetes and GitOps is perfect solution for us for a database. If we were to use some other database, we can do that. And some other databases such as Postgres or MySQL, we can definitely do that, but it's usually a little bit more convoluted. So from that sense, SerialDB being kind of separated from storage and compute really makes it easier to manage and regulate, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. So I have a question. To deploy SerialDB on Kubernetes, it should just be like how you normally, kind of similar to how you deploy all the other backend, like you build different images, depends on how, like when you update your app, and then you declare all the secrets like in a secret YAML file. So is that the case?
If I understand you correctly, so you're saying that your question is whether the deployment sequence is similar to how you deploy other code and other images.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, absolutely. So nothing is different. So what I did with SerialDB was that it just had extra layer of TiKV, and TiKV has its extra layer of TiDB operator. So in order to install TiKV, there was a few layers to kind of go over. But what I did was to specify an image, specify a version of TiKV, and that's done with TiKV. And SerialDB was another thing. I said, okay, SerialDB, I just want to get the version 1.0.0. It's similar to how you would do with any other images. I didn't do more than Argo CD and SerialDB, but obviously for our use cases, for instance, we have so many more cloud-native solutions and our own images that are built in the same way. So what we have is the Git repository that has all the details about how SerialDB is deployed, how the applications are deployed, everything in the one Git repository. So in that sense, one thing that you have to note is that you have to make sure that the directory structure is well maintained. If you have a directory structure of like everything in like one directory, it would be really difficult to manage. But that may be one difficulty with GitOps, but otherwise it has been, definitely something that we can't miss as a business.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.